It's hard to contain your excitement when you get something you've really wanted. Like the gold standard in automotive protection, WeatherTech floor liners. With deep sculpted channels and laser measured for total protection in the front, back, and even up the sides.
Dad, you're going viral.
What? WeatherTech me.
So don't be shy, enjoy. Order your premium American-made products at WeatherTech.com.
Second time ever, we're going to go endurance racing here for the Porsche Sprint Challenge. Obviously not a sprint this time, though, as we come to Road America, Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, for the Porsche Endurance Challenge North America. We started off at Circuit of the Americas, and I'm noticing a bit of a theme here, Ryan, but I think this is a perfect venue for this style of racing. Now, this isn't the race itself. This is our qualifying, technically called qualifying practice, as they'll have both drivers having to put times in.
Yeah, 40-minute session, and it is an additive between a cumulative time, I guess you would say, between the two drivers in the two driver lineups. They take the best time from each of the two drivers, add them together. There are a few single driver lineups entered in the field as well, and in those cases, it's the top two times from those single drivers that get added together. And at the end of the session, we'll have the grid. Now, I'm not sure we'll have it for you live on the program because some calculations need to be done behind the scenes. But that said, we'll do our best to keep you informed about what's to come here this afternoon with that 1 hour endurance test here at Road America.
And the thing I love about the Endurance Challenge is they allow a lot of these drivers to bring their coaches in or their friends and all these various people within the motorsport scene to get to compete together. And for those that follow Porsche Sprint Challenge, you know, there's all the regulars. We've got Therese Lalu, we've got Reinhold Kron, Paul Bocuse is out there, and Jared Thomas. But then you have names like Jan Magnussen out there. You have Tristan Vautier. Some really big sports car names, which makes this such a fun event to watch.
Sports car, open wheel background for some of these guys. Yeah, really remarkable. We've always joked that if you could ever let the coaches at a Porsche Sprint Challenge weekend have a race of their own, it would be must-see TV. And I think we tested that theory at Circuit of the Americas. We'll do it again here this afternoon. I'm really excited for it. You mentioned a couple of the big names, but Patrick Long is here, longtime Porsche factory driver. Great to have him as part of this. Luke Hartog, who's currently in the midst of a championship run in Porsche Carrera Cup right now. He'll be in one of these cars. Alec Udell is having an amazing season at SRO right now. Just a snippet of what's to come. Some big names, plus the Sprint Challenge regulars going endurance racing. What's not to love?
Absolutely, and you can see with the amount of cars that are competing, they have filled the track out here, not just on our pictures. I mean, look at the track map up in the upper right of your screen. It goes for a long while, and that's not even all the cars, I think, quite out yet, as a few are still emerging a bit late. And the other interesting thing about this is that it will be a combined qualifying, not just with drivers, but with the two classes, as the GT3 Cup class and the Cayman class are both having to share the track.
It's going to be a crowded racetrack, and actually it's that multi-class aspect that I'm really excited for. And this afternoon when we go racing for the first time, we don't see that a whole lot. Certainly in the North American Championships, it's more common in USA West, but frankly, the number of Caymans in that field means that we don't see a ton of overlap. It doesn't usually play a massive role in the race, but I think that could be very different, especially if we get long green flag runs this afternoon. It should be a lot of fun, and if you think about it from the perspective of the Sprint Challenge regulars, especially those that are newer to sports car racing, that have aspirations of moving into the SRO world or into IMSA or the World Endurance Championship. Multi-class racing is part and parcel with high-level sports car racing. So this is a chance to learn another skill, and that's a big part of the Sprint Challenge platform as part of the Porsche Pyramid. This is about honing those skills to prepare you for the next step, which could be Carrera Cup, it could be GT4, it could be GT3, whatever the case may be. This is an important component of that, and I think that's part of the reason why we see this format being so popular.
That's a good point, that this really does help them allow drivers to sharpen their skills in so many ways. As we get our views from the Yokohama blimp around our first flying laps, you could see that was the car of Bocuse and Estep there that get to go out first and get that clear track in front of them. They took the win in the inaugural race back at Circuit of the Americas, so they it seems fitting that they're out there first trying to set a flyer out here. It's pretty cool out this morning, so they're going to have to get those tires warmed up, which does make me wonder if it's not going to be that first lap that we'll see the quickest times.
That's a good point for sure. It is sunnier than it's been all weekend long. In fact, this is more like what the forecast looked like coming into the weekend for all of the days. We had a lot of overcast skies, though, a bit unexpectedly over the past 2 days. No clouds to be seen out our window, at least. Just sunshine above Road America. They're off in the distance. You do see some light clouds, but in general, it's all about the sunshine. And I did overhear a little bit of chatter as I walked through the paddock this morning. Teams and drivers talking about needing to make some slight tweaks to the setup to account for the fact that the track temperature is going to come up more rapidly than we've seen the last few days now that the sun is out and starting to heat up that relatively new darker track surface. This is only 2 years old. Last year was the debut of this new repaved track surface here at Road America, coincidentally. It was the first time that there was a full repave here since 1995. Doesn't happen often,
Wow.
But they did a great job, and everybody's been raving about the amount of grip and the speed that's in this surface, especially as it's had a year to really take hold.
Yeah, and I did find it very interesting to see how already, even after a year, there has been quite the progression of the track. I was out on the track walk earlier this weekend, and you could tell a distinct difference between the smoothness for most of the track, but already down at the apexes, there is a lot of grit and texture that is in there that I'm sure very much affects both the grip and the tire wear.
Definitely does, and again, that's something that the teams will have to adapt to, because I think the tire wear this year is different than it was when the surface was brand new. There was a lot of talk last year, too, about the grip mostly being if you stay online and if you venture offline just a little bit, that grip drops down tremendously. But that's not been the case to the same degree as the track has seasoned a little bit, and this new surface has gone through a Wisconsin winter and now part of a second summer as well. So I don't think you'll see that quite as dramatically, but it is something that the teams have to adjust to, because the notebook from last year might not translate directly one year to the next.
Yeah, I don't think talk about that enough, that as two guys from the Midwest, we know how much the pavement gets torn up by the dramatic shift between the seasons out here, because it gets very cold and then it does get quite hot during the summers as well, so that puts a lot of wear and tear on it. We've had some interesting names up at the front in our classes so far, and again, this is just the first drivers, and they can swap them out anytime they please during the session, since they're taking the fastest lap of each of the drivers. Eric Lapp right now is our quickest in the GT3 Cup, with Zachary Vanier in the number 270 following him up. We head down to the Caymans, and Chloe Chambers is the quickest. And I got to say, she needs to, if it stays this way, she has a feather she can put in her cap. She's quicker than Spencer Pompelli.
Oh, I'd put a screenshot of this if I were Chloe Chambers right now. I mean, She's an accomplished driver in her own right, don't get me wrong, but Spencer Pompelli right behind her, Patrick Long right behind him, then it's Tristan Vautier, who's made an IndyCar start this year, longtime IndyCar and sports car driver. Ian Porter right there in the mix as well. And now everything's changing up on the timing and scoring as drivers come across the line to set new fast times. In fact, Cameron Lawrence, a longtime Trans Am driver, former 24 Hours of Daytona class winner, just jumped to the top. Another one of these talented coaches that's part of several of these driver lineups. These are going to be names that sports car racing fans will recognize, that's for sure.
Down into Turn 5, we see a few of them. Certainly still a lot of traffic out there. I'm kind of curious how trying to find that clear bit of track will evolve throughout this 40-minute session. They have plenty of time, obviously. Hopefully, if it stays green during this session, fingers crossed. But the drivers still will get more and more intermixed between the Caymans and the Cup cars, which will make it all the harder. And with, let's see, how many do we have out there currently? It looks like 34 cars I'm seeing that have set a time so far. That is plenty, even with 4 miles of racetrack to spread out on.
Hey, Joe, we just saw from outside of the car an interesting moment here for Ian Porter down into Turn 5. This effectively is a replay of it, and my, oh my, that closing rate down in the braking zone, that was awfully close, and Ian did a good job to avoid. And then you see the speed disparity as the Cup car comes through, and Porter realizes this lap is scuppered. He's out of the throttle at that point. But, boy, that was awfully close. Interesting news, by the way, out of the Rafa Racing camp. A couple of changes to their driver lineups communicated to me by the team PR, Reese White. Thank you, Reese, for all the information this weekend. Ian Porter is now set to do the whole 60 minutes solo, which is cool to see. He was previously scheduled to run with Alec Udell, and I thought that was a really interesting lineup. But for Ian, who has been a dominant force in Sprint Challenge in the Cayman class this year, this is another big step for him in his maturation process as he gets used to sports car racing, shifting over from esports. And for him to go a full 60 minutes, that's a big step, right? To run a full stint in a more professional upward trajectory series from Sprint Challenge. So really excited to see that. Alec Udell will now slide over and join Carolyn Conda in the number 84 car from Rafa Racing. And then Rafa Martinez, who has had just a miserable weekend, no real fault of his own in some respects, had an incident in the testing sessions and then secured a spare chassis that unfortunately just hasn't been able to race so far this weekend. So he's been sitting out the sprint races, but he'll now be joined by Cameron Lawrence in the number 87 car. So Rafa Racing reshuffling their lineups a little bit for the endurance race later on today.
And interesting that you bring them up now because all three of the cars just went by us on pit lane and came into their boxes in a very coordinated move. And in fact, I'm seeing the doors of all of them being opened. This seems a bit early to swap the drivers out, especially after we saw Ian have his moment. We don't know if there's maybe more in the car that he could have gone back out and got a quicker lap. But, wow, we knew they're a well-oiled team, but that was quite coordinated between all three of them.
Well, here's a question that maybe you have an answer to. They have to run the same set of tires, correct, for this entire session, or are they allowed to change a set?
That is a good question. I'll have to – let me see if I can dig through the rules here and find out.
I'll let you do that because my thought process on this would be if you have to use the same set, then maybe it does make some sense if you feel like your first driver has set a decent time to go ahead and make that change and make sure there's still tire life available for the second driver to go out and set a time. Because if you run your first driver deep into this session, then there's the chance that there wouldn't be tire left for that second driver. And that makes, if that is the way this works, and apologies for not having read up on this beforehand, but that would make for a really interesting strategy element to this practice qualifying, as it's called, because unlike other multi-driver qualifying formats where you know when driver 1 goes and you know when driver 2 goes, here, presumably it could be up to it is up to the team to decide that and then how to play the tire strategy.
Well, so here's what the rules say.
Here's the answer, I think. I see someone with a big torque wrench. But go ahead.
Yeah. They are allowed to change tires. We actually have a list of work that is allowed on the cars during qualifying pit stops. Changing/assisting the drivers, replacing a missing splitter, which is interesting. I guess that happens frequently enough that they have allowed that. Checking or adjusting tire pressures, naturally. Removing, clearing debris from radiator screens, 10 to the driver. Raise the car on the jacks for visual checks or change tires. That's all you're allowed to do.
Okay, good sleuthing there for us, Joe. So there goes my theory about this, but I guess another element to it would be with the tire change. These are you don't see competitive tire changes in this series. So with that in mind, maybe you want to make sure you've got plenty of time to get that tire change done and then leave your second driver with enough time to go out and set a lap time. But in any event, we've seen several teams already make that call to the pit lane, others electing to go and push now while there are fewer cars on the track in search of that ultimate lap time here at Road America.
Yeah, we've seen a few changes around, as you can tell on the tower on your screen. Vanier is now our quickest in the Cup cars, but down in the Cayman, Spencer Pompelli is now the quickest, but you've got Eric Filgaris out there, Tristan Vote, who we've mentioned, and Chloe is still in the top 4. So she didn't get shuffled down far. That was a very, very quick lap that she put down. Cameron Lawrence is going to be the next to round out the top 5 among the GT4 Caymans. Apparently, it says incident between cars 87 and 269 is under review post-session. 87, I believe. Yeah, that's one of the Rafa cars.
And 269 is Jim Walsh.
Interesting.
So that is a Cup car and a Cayman coming together, and that is that multi-class overlap we talked about earlier.
So hopefully that was just maybe a little miscommunication on track or something out there and nothing too serious. Again, there's really no advantage to be gained trying to get in the way of the other classes. So they'll just have to learn how to coexist with one another.
One thing to keep in mind is you look at the timing pylon on the left-hand side of the screen. That is just showing that car's best lap and whichever driver is in the car currently. So that is not necessarily a representation. In fact, it most likely is not a representation of how the grid will be arranged because, to repeat, in case you missed it earlier, the format for this is a cumulative time of the best lap time, best single lap time from each of the 2 drivers in the 2-driver lineups or the top 2 times from the single-driver lineups that we have in the field.
Even still, we can pick out a few interesting things out of it because if you've got at least one of the solo fastest laps out there, then you're probably going to be looking in a somewhat decent position. Scott Blend being down in 9th, a bit, I wouldn't say too far out of it, but I would have expected him to maybe be a little bit higher up there in his class. So hopefully they'll be able to maybe raise the bar a little bit and get in there. And then Alec Udell down in, 30th overall. I'd have to count real quickly, but it's definitely, I'd say, outside of the top dozen for that Rafa Racing number 84.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what happens. He's teamed with Carolyn Conda, remember, which is a change from the original entry list. We saw Carolyn out on track earlier, so I think they're just now making the switch to Alec Udell, who has been coaching with the Rafa Racing team all throughout the season and has the chance to hop aboard one of these cars. A lot of history for Alec in single-make Porsche racing, or not necessarily a single-make series, but there were at times single-make classes in World Challenge, which he participated in driving Cup cars. This is going back a few years now at this point, but I'm not sure how much Cayman experience he's got. That said, I think he'll be a quick study, and I do know he hops in these cars as part of his coaching duties. That's one unique aspect of Porsche Sprint Challenge, where in some of the practice sessions, practice 1 to be specific, coaches are allowed to take part and maybe do a little shakedown of the race cars to make sure that the car is ready to go for especially the more inexperienced drivers in the field.
Yeah, I have to imagine that's hugely valuable because you think some of these newer drivers who may not know about setup, as we talked about earlier yesterday with one of our guests, that having a professional or your coach get in the car and be able to say, maybe you'll want to do this to the setup or do that, and that'll help help the car drive a certain way that they know their student likes to run. So I could see that being incredible for those that maybe are just trying to cut their teeth and don't have the knowledge on what exactly to do.
It's a huge asset. And the other thing, too, is it gives the less experienced driver some data to look at. You can compare head-to-head, same session, maybe even the same set of tires, same weather conditions, right? And you can lay your data over your coach's data and have something that you can really compare and contrast with. I really like that aspect of Porsche Sprint Challenge. It's something that Randy Hembry was really key on implementing when this series was formed a couple of years ago, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we've seen so much driver development in this series since its inception.
Yeah, I love the way that they've really incorporated the purpose and what they're looking to do with this into the rules, the way it all works out, and just helping drivers really work their way up through that Porsche ladder system. With about half the session left to go for qualifying practice of the second ever round of the Porsche Endurance Challenge North America. And if I'm seeing for a second, I thought maybe we had some combined time showing that was just somebody who was on outlap, had a 6-minute lap out there. But you can see them still flashing across the start-finish line with the car of Lalu just going by the 242 JDX car, currently with their quickest time putting them in 7th. But remember, it is the combination of each driver's time, or if they have a solo driver, the combination of their 2 fastest laps that will ultimately set this. So don't take too much stock into the tower that you see on the left. And obviously the website and various outlets will give us the official lineup a little bit later today.
Just noticed that Alexandra Prema just went to the top of the charts in the Caymans, and that is a cool name to have as part of this. I know you guys talked about him a lot at Circuit of the Americas, but what a varied resume that he has. I think he's probably the only one here, well, now I'm second-guessing myself, but one of the few, let's put it that way here, with Australian supercars experience on the resume. What awesome cars those are, and Prema, certainly one of the world's best going back through his varied career over the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, definitely not the only driver coming from Aussie background. I think Madeline Stewart is as well. I don't think she made it to supercars, but that'd be something we'll have to look into. See if there's anybody else here that's had a drive in those, because sometimes they do have those guest drivers come in.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Maybe at the Gold Coast, would someone like Patrick Long have gone over and given
totally
that a try, or something along those lines? I know that was not uncommon at one time, and even at Bathurst, right, to have a guest driver from time to time, although they typically do like to have a Bathurst specialist for the 1,000, the great race, of course. Nevertheless, pretty cool to have Prema in the championship once again, as he was at Circuit of the Americas.
Exactly. Well, as we have now officially passed that halfway mark, I imagine we should see more teams start to swap out drivers if they haven't already. Aaron Janson, who we watched yesterday, have a very good run in the GT3 Cup cars, is managed to bring that up to 5th overall in the 250 Charlie Hayes racing machine. And got to say, he's impressed. And there you go. Thomas Sargent for GMG Racing, fastest of anybody with a 2:07.8 for that 232 machine. I think that's the car that Washington is sharing.
Well, we were talking about Antipodeans, and Thomas Sargent fits the bill, coming from Australia, and he's been racing stateside for a couple of seasons now. Ran in Carrera Cup. This year, he's racing in GT World Challenge America alongside Kyle Washington, where they teamed up to win one of the 2 races at VIR a couple of weeks ago. Really quick driver, great in these 911 Cup cars, with a lot of experience here in a short amount of time on North American circuits. So not a surprise to see him jump to the top. And you mentioned Aaron Janson, and I have to issue a mea culpa. Sorry to Charlie Hayes Racing. Yesterday, I mistakenly said that Aaron was driving for JTR Motorsports Engineering. That's who he drives for, of course, in MX5 Cup. And even though I wrote down that he was with Charlie Hayes Engineering, that's not what I said, so apologies there. And what Charlie Hayes has done in a short amount of time starting his own operation after many years working for Flying Lizard. Really remarkable, and doing a great job here with Jean-Son, who's making his debut in single-bake Porsche racing.
Yeah, there's a lot of pride in getting these teams running. As we talked to Victoria yesterday, and all that they do to get these things off the ground. So yeah, I can understand really wanting to credit where credit is due on that one. So it's no wonder that they raised a bit of a stink about that one. But did Rob Walker just move up there? Or that was just for a position, it looks like, over Udell's number 84. That is the 53 JTR Motorsports car. And need to see actually who is sharing that number 53 machine. And I think that is a solo effort, actually. I think Rob Walker's doing that on his own, unless I'm missing his teammates.
That's what I've got as well. I think you're correct, and we'll be corrected if we are incorrect. Meanwhile, Jean-Son just went to the top of the charts. How about that for Charlie Hayes and company? 2:07.566, best individual time by a pretty wide margin, all things considered, about a quarter of a second over Thomas Sargent. Then it's the 2:70. Not sure if Mike Mim was the one that set that time or not, but that's the one in the car right now. And interesting that as we say that, I guess maybe it was Elliott Skier driving that car that just went to the top. Maybe not Jean-Son, as that just changed on my timing and scoring page. Elliott Skier, really talented driver, very busy this year racing Porsches in multiple championships, SRO as well as IMSA, and having a really good year all told alongside his co-driver in those championships, Adam Adelson.
I was wondering why I didn't know that Elliott Skier was here because, great driver out there, and it's because our sheets say to be decided. So, yeah, I definitely would have zeroed in on that name. So I am not shocked at all that Elliott has now topped the timing sheets, and by a quarter of a second. So not a huge margin, but definitely a healthy one.
Remember, he is a champion in what was effectively the predecessor of this series when it was the Porsche, what was it, Cup USA. I got to do some thinking on this one. But anyway, the predecessor to what has become Sprint Challenge, and was tabbed at the time by Patrick Long to be maybe the next great American Porsche driver, and it really looked like he was headed that direction. Unfortunately, his career got a bit derailed, just a lack of funding, really, more than anything else. Lack of opportunity kept him from having a chance to race at a higher level, and we really didn't hear from him for a while until he showed up in GT4 America a few years back in a Cayman alongside Adam Adelson, and they had a couple good years doing that before going GT3 racing. And the sky's the limit now, it appears, with the level of success that he and Adam have had in GT3 and SRO, and now this year almost running a full season at IMSA. They missed the race in Canada, but will run every other round. And from talking to Elliott, they've got some exciting things planned for the future, too.
This is the car of Chianchetti and Magnussen that we saw really diving it into turn one. The car dancing on the brakes into there, so it is being pushed. I'm trying to see which of the two is actually in it right now. It looks like Chianchetti is in the car. He is hustling that thing. I'm definitely eager to see how they fare in the race, Magnussen. Obviously, with everything from Formula One to IMSA to just about you name it, he has driven it for many, many years. And I don't think we really got to see a whole lot of him at the COTA race. And I think there's definitely a number of people that would love to see what will happen once he gets into the car.
I'm one of them. It's awesome to have Jan Magnussen here, and he's at all of the Sprint Challenge weekends. He is fully embedded with the MDK Motorsports team, a brand ambassador, works with their drivers, a great asset to have, someone who's had so much success, primarily with Corvette racing, but in sports cars at least, racing and winning in the 24 Hours of Daytona, 24 Hours of Le Mans. But he's been with the MDK squad a couple of times in Porsches, running in various endurance races around the world, and has been a big part of that operation. In the meantime, we should mention that Riley Dickinson, who's a frequent guest of ours in the broadcast booth, he just went to the top of timing and scoring. Really quick lap from Riley at a 2:07 flat, effectively, a half a second clear of the next fastest car. And one other bit of business I did remember when I stopped talking, it came back to me. Porsche GT3 Cup Challenge USA by Yokohama. That was the former name of this championship.
I think
going
I like
back
the
a few
new name
years.
better.
Me too. Thank you, Randy. Red flag. We got a couple of cars off down in turn 5, and I'm not entirely sure just from that shot who we're looking at. One I think might have been the 8, which is Kopczynski and Filgaris.
Yeah.
The other is the 269.
That is, I actually don't have them on my sheet.
Me neither. So maybe I misread that. Let's try that again. Oh, there we go. Alessandro Bressan for Competition Motorsports would be in the 269, if I'm reading that correctly, and I think I am. Now we got Cayman Beached, and then that would be the Kopczynski Filgaris car, and then Bressan, who's a name that's been around the sports car racing world for a little while now, certainly not unfamiliar, ends up just a little bit further up the road.
Yeah, so down at turn 5 here, it is possible to get tangled up with one another. Right front tire looks a little bit askew on the 8. Not sure if that's them trying to steer that out or if it's actually been hit. It does look like it's been hit because there's some damage on the bodywork, it appears. So the two may have come together to cause this incident, unfortunately, which is a real shame. About 10 minutes left. They might be able to get this cleared up and get this back out.
On our marching ants, I see another car that has stopped, and that's the 24 of Rizzo. And the word from race control on that is that they simply have run out of fuel. So at least no harm, no foul on that. And I don't even think they would be faulted for bringing out the red flag. So maybe really lucked out on that one.
Absolutely. For those that don't know, one of the rules in this series is if you bring out the red flag in qualifying, your fastest lap is deleted. So they would lose that if they get called to blame for that one. But we'll see if that winds up being the case or not. Incident between cars 8 and 269 is under review. No surprise on that one. We'll see what race control winds up saying in the end. But yeah, so this brings a halt to the session. Riley Dickinson currently holding the fastest lap, or at least the 208 car holds the fastest lap, but we wait to find out what the combined lap times will be, and that's in the GT3 Cups. Alexander Premott is your quickest over in the GT4s.
I think we're going to have a look at the incident. I think we do have a chance to take a peek back at what happened. Again, this is on the rundown into turn 5. Heavy braking zone, overtaking opportunity, and 2 cars from 2 different classes. We talked about this a couple of times already, the multi-class nature of it. And I'm not sure that's something that Tom Kopczynski has a ton of experience with, at least at this level. I'm not sure. He might have done some lower-level racing with multi-class situations, but we'll be keeping an eye out to see if we can take a peek back at what happened with this incident. I just hope both cars are not too seriously damaged. I don't know if Tom's got multiple chassis here, because this could affect his sprint race, which is coming up a little bit later. Here's a look. Ooh.
Well, that's the GT4 coming in from behind, which would be unusual, so that may have been either outbraking themselves or just a loss of the brakes.
Looks like Bressan more or less got away with that. That's the good news. And maybe was there... No, I think this is maybe where the damage was done. So a little bit of side-to-side contact. Right front, certainly damaged for Kopczynski. And he had an incident yesterday, if you remember, in the sprint race. I talked to him this morning, and he was all smiles. He said, it's like it never happened. I'm ready to go. But unfortunately, this practice qualifying, or qualifying practice, rather, is how it's termed, has not gone his way.
I was trying to make out who that third car was that was going very slowly on the inside. Now, I don't think that was Rizzo's car, because his is a dark-colored car. That actually may have been Jim Walsh. I suspect he's probably trying to just get out of the way because he wasn't on a hot lap, but it just struck me that there was a car that was off pace to the inside, and I'm kind of curious if that was involved in any sort of way that maybe distracted one of the drivers. A lot to pick apart on this one because this is just an unusual set of circumstances.
It certainly is, and I'm in agreement that perhaps that car that appeared to be slowing maybe just to get out of the way might have inadvertently played a part in how this played out. Hard to say for sure. Looks like the flatbed will be needed for both cars, so maybe the damage a little bit more significant for Alessandro than I had previously thought.
Definitely damage to the right front that we were able to see on Kopczynski's machine, but we haven't gotten visual on the left-hand side where they would have hit on Bresson's car. So we'll see if we get a glance at it once they get that onto the flatbed and can really assess whether or not that's going to be weekend ending. We have to remember that endurance race is later today. So if they are able to, it's going to be the last race of the day, so they'll have some time. But if it is major, then yeah, there's no working overnight on this one. It's basically pack it up and go home early.
We've got some top-notch teams in this paddock, of course. They know how to put these cars back together. It looked like Alessandro might have wanted to go and have a word, and the track safety crew said, no, let's not do that. It's probably prudent. Bresson with all kinds of experience, everything from Asian Le Mans to European Le Mans. He knows his business, and unfortunately has been on the wrong end of this one, it's safe to say.
Yeah, I can't imagine that Bresson's car was much at fault on that one. It'd be hard-pressed to figure out what he could have done that could have caused that. But again, we're just speculating based on what we saw on the replays that we got there. Meanwhile, at looks like Blake McDonald, I think, getting out of the car.
I think it would be Riley Dickinson who was in at the end
right.
there. He's sharing that car with Blake, and handshakes all around, as you would anticipate. The Kelly Moss with Riley team very pleased, as they should be, for how that one played out, with Riley setting the fastest time, and by a pretty hefty margin as well. No surprise, Riley, the reigning Carrera Cup North America champion, and currently racing Caymans in the IMSA GT4 ranks. Really quick driver. Impressive young man from Texas.
The thing that amuses me, I was reminded of this. I wanted to bring it up earlier when we were talking about him joining us up in the booth. From what I was told, initially he didn't really want to get behind the microphone. And then after his first time, we were told he actually requested to come back and do it some more. So I guess he had fun getting to call some of these races. So definitely an incredibly talented race car driver, and looking forward to seeing how his career progresses.
And like so many of the drivers that we have hop up here to join us, just provides great insight, can talk about the track because he's raced here, can talk about the car because he's raced it, and that is so helpful to convey the story of the different sessions, as the checker flag does wave prematurely, which unfortunately is continuing a trend in all of our qualifyings, it seems like, here this weekend. So what we can tell you is the individual best times and how they stack up, and Riley Dickinson shows the way ahead of Elliott Skier and Thomas Sargent, Trenton Estep, and Mike Mim jumping up to fifth there towards the latter stages of this one. And then down in the Cayman ranks, Alexandra Prema, Luke Hartog, current Carrera Cup points leader, Andrew Davis up into the third spot, Eric Filgaris in the car that unfortunately was involved in this incident, that's the car right there, was fourth, and Thomas Merrill down in fifth in class. But, of course, it is cumulative when it comes to setting the grid, so we'll have to wait and see how this one all shakes out, but it does set up for an exciting one-hour race this afternoon.
I'm actually curious, and again, we might have to dig into the rules, and I don't think I have time for this, but it does say car 8 and 24 causing a red flag, loss of fastest lap. Now, I don't know if that is one fastest lap or if that is both drivers' fastest laps.
It's a good question. That is a good question. So, yeah, we'll try and endeavor to get some answers to that, and we'll have the starting grid for you, of course, when time comes to go endurance racing this afternoon.
Absolutely. So thank you for joining us here for qualifying practice. The big show coming up later today for the second ever race of the Porsche Endurance Challenge North America. In the meantime, we do have more racing coming very soon at 10:30 local time. We have the Porsche Sprint Challenge North America Cayman Series for race number 2. Make sure and join us here once again.